Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 313. I am so glad that you are here today. We are talking all about motivation versus executive dysfunction. How do we know when our kids just don't want to get it done because they just don't want to get it done, or they're really struggling with their executive function skills? We're going to try to tease a little bit of that out today, and I hope you'll be able to walk away with some practical strategies to kind of differentiate between those two things and some actionable tips to help support your kiddos when they are struggling with motivation caused by executive dysfunction. Before we begin, though, I want to give a special shout out and thank you to CTC Math, our season-long sponsor. We're so grateful for their support. You'll hear more about them later on in this episode, but in the meantime, if you want, you can check them out at ctcmath.com or go over to the show notes for this episode at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast and click on the link for a very special deal that they have for all of the listeners here. Okay, so pop your earbuds in, go for a walk if you can. If not, hide in the closet with some chocolate so you can listen in peace, or just get some of the things done that you need to get done around the house, whatever it takes to get you to be able to focus and listen to this podcast episode. Let's pop those earbuds in and get started on today's episode. Hey there, I am so glad that you are here today. This is going to be a great episode. And we are going to answer all the questions that you have about executive function skills versus a lack of motivation. So if your kiddo, like just picture this, because I think that a lot of us can resonate with it. If your kiddo can spend hours building, creating, or diving into something they love, but can't seem to start a simple task, it's easy to think they're just not motivated. But what if that's not true at all? Today, we are going to decode what's really going on, and we're going to talk about how to support kids who want to do the things they need to do, but just can't get started. All right. So in a nutshell, we're going to talk about one of the most misunderstood challenges when it comes to homeschooling your neurodivergent kiddo: motivation versus executive dysfunction. If you've ever said to your kiddo or thought, "Why is this so hard for you?" or "You were just doing something much more challenging than this. Why can't you just get this done?" Or "If you cared at all about your education, you would just do it." Or "If you want to get to that thing that you want to do, just get this done first." This episode is for you. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why motivation and undermotivation is often misdiagnosed or misunderstood. You'll learn a simple framework to help you decode what's actually going on in a given moment. And you'll walk away with tools that will work with your child's brain and not against it. At the end of this episode, or now if you want to head over to the episode show notes page, but make sure you come back because this is going to be a good one, we have a free handout that has very quick, easy to implement strategies for each of the executive function skills that we're going to talk a little bit about today, and you can implement them right away. So check that out if you have a chance over on the show notes for this episode at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast, or anywhere you listen to your podcasts, it will be in the podcast description. All right, so here's where we're going to start. Most of the time, even if it seems like your kids just aren't motivated, just don't care, it's not actually a motivation issue, especially when we're dealing with kiddos who are neurodivergent. Maybe they are gifted, twice exceptional. Maybe they have anxiety. Maybe they have ADHD. Maybe they have a learning challenge like dyslexia or dysgraphia. Maybe they just struggle in another way and you don't have a formal diagnosis yet. Or you'll never have a formal diagnosis. You just know that some things don't come as easily for them as they do for others their age. If it were a motivation issue, your child wouldn't work hard on anything, right? If they can work hard on some things and not on others, then it's not a motivation issue. There's usually something deeper. If it was simply a motivation issue, they wouldn't be able to hyperfocus and they wouldn't show persistence in their preferred activities. But they do. They do show persistence and hard work and hyperfocus and perseveration on certain things. So what's the difference? Here's the thing. Motivation is not a character trait. It's a state that depends on certain conditions. For neurodivergent kids or any kind of differently wired brain, those conditions are often fragile. So let's talk about what executive function is and how it relates to motivation, achievement, the ability to get things done, and everything really that your kiddos are going through on a daily basis. And frankly, what we're going through as adults on a daily basis, because I'm sure some of you listening have experienced similar struggles to your kids because neurodivergent brains don't fall too far from the trees from which they grow. So, executive function is the brain's management system. It includes task initiation, which is like getting started on something. It includes working memory, holding the steps in mind as to what needs to be done to reach a conclusion, the planning and the organization and the prioritization of those tasks, emotional regulation. So, executive function is not just about getting things done and planning, it's about all of the things that go into it, including regulating their emotions as they approach the different parts of the task. It also includes flexible thinking. And as we know, some of our neurodivergent kids can be really rigid thinkers. When these systems are overwhelmed or undersupported, you can see avoidance, procrastination, shutdown, emotional reactions. So we need to reframe it in our head that they're not refusing, they're just stuck somewhere along the path. I did a speaking event once where I spoke about executive functions and what they were all about. And for that presentation, I created a kind of description of them that I thought really summed up how our kids, especially those with neurodivergent brains, process these executive functions. In a normal brain or a neurotypical brain, I hesitate to use the word normal, but it just comes out sometimes. A neurotypical brain, right? Executive functions are all of the planning, prioritizing, all of the things that go into doing something and getting it done and managing your life. And so if we think about like our brains and the system that controls the executive function skills as like a funnel, we have all of the different tasks like going into that top of the funnel. And a neurotypical brain processes them, if not single file, in kind of an orderly fashion, right? They need to think about all of the things that go into the task or the activity or the whatever it is they're doing. They need to prioritize and organize those tasks. They need to plan them out. Then they need to initiate the task, get started on it, and then follow through, persevere through it, and then complete it and conclude the whole process. When our neurodivergent kids, again, no matter how their brains are wired in a divergent way, when they are processing all of those different things that go into a task, they're all going into the funnel in the same way that they're going into the funnel for a neurotypical kiddo. But when there's also the stimuli of the things that they want to do, maybe the noise from a sibling, or if they're at a co-op like the other kids, maybe they're itchy because they have a skin thing going on, or they're not feeling great and their head's pounding, or it's raining outside, so it feels or sounds different, or the pressure in the atmosphere is a little off, whatever it is. That can start to overwhelm the system so that funnel can't allow each of those skills to go through in an orderly step-by-step fashion. And they start to get stopped up on each other. And they back up until they're like overflowing the opposite way in the funnel. And our neurodivergent kids' brains get so overwhelmed that they just shut down and nothing happens as a result. So again, they're not refusing to do the thing or to be motivated to do it. They're just stuck and they don't know how or why or when to get going on it. So let's examine 5 reasons behind the not motivated thing that our kids might be experiencing. Okay, so the 5 kind of hidden reasons behind not motivated. This is the heart of what we're trying to get to when we're figuring out what our kids need when it comes to executive dysfunction. Task initiation friction. So sometimes the brain just can't get over the starting line. I have this problem often. I am a grown adult who has graduated from her homeschool, who runs a business, runs a podcast, keeps things going, and is still homeschooling 2 kids at home. And I still get stuck. The idea of getting started sometimes overwhelms my brain because all I can think about is what the end result needs to look like or what an ideal end result would look like if I were this person I saw on the internet or this mom from co-op who seems to have it all together. And I just can't get myself out of the starting gate. So if your kiddos are struggling with task initiation friction, their brain just can't get over that starting line. And you might notice signs like them just staring off into space or kind of wandering around trying to figure out what it is they need to do or where they need to go, or they're just wandering aimlessly. Or them saying, I'll just do it later. Or them picking up a book and just reading the book that they wanted to read. You can support them by stopping and saying, hey, let's start this together. Let me see where you're stuck and let's move forward. Or, hey, I'll do the first line and then you can do the next line. Or body doubling. I've talked about body doubling in a couple different episodes, and I'll link to some of the past episodes where I talk about that in the show notes for this particular episode so you can go back. But body doubling essentially is sitting with your kid and being right next to them to help them keep motivated. Now, I know a lot of you, because I'm there too and have been there off and on throughout my years of homeschooling, are thinking like, okay, my kid should be able to do this by themselves right now. I don't want to sit down next to them and hold their hand or hold space with them the whole time they're getting their schoolwork done because I have things I need to do too. You're absolutely right. However, we have neurodivergent kids. And because we have neurodivergent kids, they need extra levels of scaffolding to get to this success path. We want them to feel successful. We want them to thrive in their homeschool. And sometimes they just need extra support, no matter what others their age are doing. And so we might need to sit with them and do it. Okay, so if it's not task initiation friction, it may be overwhelm. The whole thing feels too big or too vague for them. The task feels impossible. So some signs you might be seeing if this is what you're dealing with are immediate resistance. They're just stuck or stopped or pushing back right away. Emotional escalation. Their mood, their outbursts, their meltdowns are escalating and escalating quickly. Or complete avoidance. They just disappear. I've got a kid right now, one of my 2 remaining homeschoolers, who really conveniently disappears just about every time I ask this particular kid to take out their math assignment. Now, we use CTC math. You'll hear about it later on in this episode. CTC is great, and none of my kids have a problem with it per se. They just don't want to do math. They just don't want to do it. And so they avoid it. This particular kid avoids it very sneakily. And so some of the things we can do to support that overwhelm and avoidance is we can shrink the task. We can say just work on a couple problems and then check in or go jump on the trampoline for a couple minutes and then come back and do a couple more. We can define a clear endpoint. So if it's a task that they're overwhelmed with because it's just too big and too time consuming, we can say just put a half an hour in, just put 15 minutes in, and then have them stop at that endpoint. Or another strategy that I talked about in a previous episode that I'll link to is the postcard, not a paper strategy. And that's just have them distill whatever assignment or task or project or whatever it is down to the most important pieces and have them do that. So instead of writing a whole paper, they're writing a postcard with the summary of what they just read. Or instead of emptying the whole dishwasher, they are putting all of the silverware away and then taking a break. So do the postcard, not a paper strategy. And that's just applying it to anything, not just papers. But instead of doing the whole big task, break it down and do a segment of the task, like a postcard versus a paper. Okay, another hidden thing when it comes to motivation versus executive dysfunction is a working memory load. So this is when there's just too many steps to hold at once. So maybe your kiddo is showing signs of forgetting the instructions or doing things out of order or asking repeated questions. You're repeating the instructions again and again. The way you can support this is write it down. One of the things that we've used for this strategy before, we have a whiteboard in our dining room, KA homeschool room. And I really use the term homeschool room loosely, as we don't really, as my kids are now, my remaining two in my homeschool are 16 and 13. We don't have a homeschool room where we all gather like we did when they were all younger. But all of our homeschooling stuff, our supplies, our resources, the beaten up table that has more marker on it than wood showing anymore, is in our dining room. We still have a whiteboard in there, and oftentimes when things get too big and my kids can't keep track of all of the tasks that I need them to do, this is especially true if I have to do something during the day and I won't be home. My 16-year-old and my 13-year-old are home alone completing a task or tasks. I'll write everything down on the whiteboard so they can cross it off as they finish. Okay, another thing that you can do to help with the working memory load is you can create visual checklists. And I'm actually in the process of doing this in my own home right now. Somehow, over the last 6 to 8 months, we have fallen in, I'll just politely say, a rut. Having the majority of the tasks that need to be done on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly cleaning basis fall to me. And families go through this regularly, right? It ebbs and flows. People, depending on their schedules, help out more or less than other times. And right now, if I'm not doing the majority of the tasks to keep up with the house, I'm needing to delegate them in a way where I have to explain all the things that happen in them. So if I'm telling my husband or one of my teens or young adult children to clean the kitchen, I need to remind them, or it's not going to get done, to make sure every dish ends up in the dishwasher. And if the dishwasher is full, somebody has it running. Whatever didn't fit in the dishwasher is in the sink, cleaned off so things don't get caked on overnight, ready for the next time we run the dishwasher, that all counters are wiped down, that the stovetop is wiped down, and that everything's put away. Chairs are pushed in, the kitchen table's cleaned off. So all the little things that go along with cleaning the kitchen. Otherwise, I'll go into the cleaned kitchen to find a couple dishes still left on the counter, a spill on the kitchen table that wasn't cleaned up, and none of the counters wiped. But the vast majority of all of the dishes put away. And it was getting increasingly frustrating because I felt like I was nagging, and it's something that everybody's capable of doing. But there were too many steps for some of my people in my house to keep track of at once. And I decided that we needed to bring back the visual schedules of our past. There was a time, especially when my kids were younger. I have 4 kids who are all neurodivergent in some way, shape, or another. And each of them has different struggles. Each of them have different strengths. But at some point or another in my kids' upbringing, we have had note cards with checklists written out for what needs to be done. Like when a couple of my kids were very young, there were checklists in the bathroom laminated that said, in the morning, I brush my teeth, wash my face, I get dressed, I put my pajamas in the dirty clothes chute, whatever. At night, this is my bedtime routine. And so we've used visual checklists in various rooms throughout all of their lives. And my oldest is now 23. I've spent the last couple of weeks recreating visual checklists that relate to each of the tasks that needs to be done in each of the rooms. So I didn't make, for example, I didn't make a visual checklist of what needs to be done when somebody's doing laundry, but I made a visual checklist of who does laundry on what day of the week. Because a couple of years ago, all of the laundry was put back on its individual owners because everybody was old enough to do laundry, but nobody was doing it. And I would end up spending days with dirty laundry bleeding into my kitchen because our laundry room is very small. It just fits a washer and a dryer in the slop sink or utility sink, and it opens up to the garage. So it's the way we all come in and out every day. And so there's nowhere to put the dirty laundry. And so it just spills into the kitchen in piles. And it was becoming very frustrating for me. But if we all keep up with our laundry, then and we all do our laundry each once a week, typically we each have two loads, a dark load and a light colored load. Possibly me or one of the girls might have a third load of delicates, but all of that's doable in a day. And I had turned it over to every individual, but we got very lazy and behind, and the schedule wasn't being very enforced. All of us had an overload of focus and energy and motivation over the last couple of months. So I've rewritten out what the schedule is. So everybody has their days assigned to them. And that is what's being posted in the laundry room. In the kitchen on the side of the refrigerator is the checklist of what needs to be done in order to make sure the kitchen is completely cleaned each day. Same thing for the family room and the school room and the hallway and the bathrooms upstairs. So visual schedules and checklists can really help you out. Also, if your kiddos are struggling with working memory overload, then you can do things one step at a time. Instead of giving them all of the things that they need to do to clean their room, you can say, hey, go upstairs, get all of the dirty laundry sorted into your darks and your lights, and come check in with me when that's done. Awesome, fabulous. I'm so glad you got that part done. Now go back up to your room and collect all of the dishes that somehow illegally made their way upstairs and bring them down and put them in the dishwasher. Okay, once the dishes are all done, high fives, hooray. Now go upstairs and make your bed and then check back in. So you can do one step at a time. That helps when working memory is overloaded. The fourth kind of struggle can be emotional load. This is especially true of those of our kids or us as adults who are listening who have anxiety or struggle with perfectionism or have a fear of failure. It gets very emotional when you're afraid you're going to fail or when you are struggling to make sure it's perfect or you have anxiety in any way, shape, or form. Signs for this being your struggle are the words, I can't, or I don't know how, or I'm not sure. All other signs can include meltdowns or just complete and total refusal. So some of the ways that we can support kids who have an emotional load when it comes to getting their stuff done or getting started, we can lower the stakes. Hey, this doesn't matter in the scheme of things. The goal is really just to get you to understand how to form a complete sentence from the capital letter at the beginning to the period at the end. So let's just write a couple sentences to make sure you know how to do it. We need a subject and we need a verb, maybe a couple adjectives to make it a little more interesting. So lower the stakes, and this is a biggie, normalize mistakes. Now, this is something you can do periodically as a parent to be proactive. You can make mistakes in front of your kids and then blow it off. No big deal. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just dropped that egg. Hey, can you go get me another one? I'm going to clean this up real quick. That was so careless of me. I just need to pay more attention, but no big deal. We'll just get another egg. Doing things that show that it's okay to move on when a mistake is made helps normalize that everybody makes mistakes and we can just move on. I was teaching a class at co-op this semester. We were doing life in a rotting log, microhabitats, and focusing specifically on all of the things that happen under a rotting log in the forest. And we had all sorts of specimen and creepy crawlies in the class. And each time we studied a different one. And we did a nature journal entry. In the first couple of classes, all of the kids were like, I'm a terrible artist. I can't draw, blah, blah, blah. And I said, this isn't art class. This is science class. And it's not about perfection. It's not about it looking exactly like the cricket you're looking at. It's about having a representation of the cricket to help solidify it in your brain. And so you can go back to the illustration and remember what you know about crickets because we're labeling its different parts and its life cycle and all of that. And this isn't art class. It's not about perfection. And I repeated that throughout the whole semester. We have 11 weeks in each of the 2 semesters of our co-op. And at the end of our class, the 11th week, one of the kids in the class gave me a drawing that she had made, and it has all sorts of little drawings all over it and little quotes from the class. And one of the quotes, really big in the middle, is, "This isn't art class." And it was just so sweet. That was something that she really latched onto because she struggled with that in the beginning. She didn't want to draw anything because she was worried it wasn't going to be exactly what it needed to look like. Normalize mistakes and model imperfect work. The pictures I drew, the illustrations of the insects and animals I drew on the whiteboard to demonstrate their nature journal page were mediocre at best. It showed that it's okay to be imperfect when it comes to that. I even made mistakes in my spelling and then just drew a line through it and rewrote it above it and didn't erase it to show that it's okay to be imperfect. We're looking for understanding and not perfection. And then another common mistake or hidden struggle of kids who seem unmotivated but are actually struggling with executive dysfunction is the interest and the dopamine. If there's low interest, there is low activation. And a lot of our neurodivergent kids really need the novelty and the dopamine that novelty provides. They are looking, their brains are looking for something to activate that excitement. And so if they're not very interested, they're not going to be activated very well. So signs you might see if a kid is struggling with interest and dopamine is disengagement or a slower pace. They're just really slow to get started, or minimal effort is being put in. Some of the ways that you can support kiddos who struggle with interest and dopamine, you can connect things to their interests as much as possible. Now, I'm not saying, and I want you to hear me really carefully on this, I'm not saying that every single thing you do in your homeschool needs to be based on their interests. I'm saying, especially in areas where your kids struggle or where they're not as interested, if you can tie it back to things they are interested in or passionate about, you'll be more successful in activating their interest and thus their motivation, and you'll be able to overcome some of those executive function struggles. Also, especially if you can't add interest in any way, add novelty. One of the things, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but it has been a while. One of the things we used to do with my oldest when he was very good at math when he was young, but he just didn't want to do it. And at the time we were using, gosh, I don't even remember what, this was early on. I think he was like in 1st or 2nd grade. So he's 23 now. So it tells you how long ago this was. I think he was using, it was the year, for maybe a year and a half, we used Math Mammoth. And I'd never used it with any of the other kids, not for any reason except it just didn't work out for us. But it had worksheets. And on every worksheet, there were anywhere between 10 and 25 problems or whatever. And so one day, just totally on a whim, I was met with the dragging feet and the frustration and the lack of motivation and the grumbling. And so I cut apart his math paper right in front of him. And I said, "Give me a second. You stay here." And I ran around the house. I cut it into 4 or 5 pieces. And I taped those 4 or 5 pieces throughout the house. And I came back and I said, "Hey, you've got 5 pieces of math. They're hidden around the house. Go find them every time you find one. Do those problems. Bring it back to me, and then go find the next one. Once you found all 5, you're done with math." Okay, it was the same amount of problems. It was the same assignment. He got through math so much more quickly that day, and then the next day was like, "How many do I have to find today?" We did that for weeks, and then it didn't work for a while, and then he asked me to cut up his papers again a couple months later. That was a strategy that provided novelty. It was interesting and different to his brain to go find it like a scavenger hunt to do the math. It didn't change the math. It didn't change the number of problems he was doing. It didn't change the outcome. It just changed the delivery in a novel way. So if you can find ways to make it novel, that will increase the interest in the dopamine. And then the other thing, if your kid will react well to this, you can use timers or challenges. I've got a couple of kids who do really well with challenges and timers, and I've got a couple of kids who do terribly with timers and challenges because it spikes their adrenaline and they get too frustrated and their anxiety then spikes and then they can't do anything. So you really have to know your kiddo in order to figure out which of the different things would be successful for them.
Okay, so let's talk about math. Specifically, let's talk about finding a program that actually works for your unique homeschoolers. In our house, we've been using CTC Math for years, and even though I am so appreciative that they sponsor this podcast, I am a paying customer. I'm still a paying customer even with their sponsorship because it's just that good, and I love supporting great companies with great programs. With 2 kids still at home, both with very different learning needs, CTC Math has been the flexible and dependable solution that I keep coming back to. One of my kiddos needs more time to process math concepts, and I love that she can move through the lessons at her own pace without feeling rushed or behind. My other kiddo, he flies. He jumps straight to the end of unit tests to see what he already knows, and then we only focus on the lessons that fill the gaps. That kind of customization is gold when you're homeschooling gifted or twice exceptional kids. CTC Math gives you the access to every grade level, from kindergarten through 12th grade with your subscription, so that your child can accelerate, review, or jump around based on their own needs, not based on some rigid curriculum structure. And because it's video-based with clear instruction and auto-graded lessons and quizzes, it frees me up to support my kids without being chained to a textbook, teacher's manual, or whiteboard. So whether your child needs more time or is racing ahead, you can tailor it all with CTC Math. Check it out at ctcmath.com. You will see why so many homeschool families trust it. And if you've got quirky math learners like I do, I think you're going to love it. If you have any questions about CTC, like I said, we've been using it for years in our homeschool, and I encourage you to reach out and ask me any questions that you have. If you do pop over there, let them know that I sent you, and let them know that you appreciate their ongoing support of homeschoolers everywhere, especially those of you here at Raising Lifelong Learners. All right, let's get back to today's episode.
Okay, so now let's try to decode some of what we're dealing with. How can we figure out what it is they're struggling with so that we can meet them where they are and support them? Instead of asking, why won't they do this? I think that first we just really need to make a reframe. It naturally frustrates us when our kids aren't going to do their work, or they are seemingly unmotivated, or they're pushing back. And our initial reaction is like, what's wrong with them? Why aren't they getting this done? Why won't they do this? Instead, I'm going to challenge you and myself, because I don't always do this, to think, what is making this hard right now? And then start to narrow it down. Think about, is it the starting? Are they just struggling to get out of the starting gate and get going for the day? Is it too big? Does it feel overwhelming because there's just too much that needs to be done? Again, I get guilty of this all the time, especially when I have big projects. All I can think about is how much I have to do, and then I just don't do any of that. I know that's an ADHD trait, and I have ADHD, but it is a huge struggle, and I know our kids struggle with that too. Is it too many steps, and they're messing up the order of the steps or trying to figure out what steps are most important and struggling with that? Or is it too emotional? Is it just too anxiety producing? Is it feeding into their need for perfection or their worry that they're not going to be good enough? Is it boring? Does it need to be more novel? Do you need to cut it up and hide it around the room? When you can start narrowing it down, it changes everything and then gives you the opportunity to use the tools that you've figured out so that you can help them be more successful. So let's take a couple real life examples. Let's first start with like math avoidance. I already gave you the example of cutting it up and putting it around the room. If you use a program like CTC Math like we do, you can screenshot that and print it. They've got PDFs you can print. So you could still use that strategy and then input answers for your kids. You could also scribe for them, or you can take a look at the kiddo that's in front of you and you have determined that they're not being lazy, right? You've started narrowing it down. They are overwhelmed and struggling with their working memory. So, what you could do is you could encourage them, like I said, to find 5 different pieces around the room, or you could have them do odds only and not do every problem on the page. You could solve the problems together, do some body doubling, do some alternating, have them talk you through the steps while you write it down. You could write down the steps. If it's long division, first you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Draw a sample problem and illustrate all of the steps involved. Another example, maybe they're showing some writing resistance and you realize this isn't lack of effort, it's a struggle with task initiation and perfectionism. So, some of the things that you could potentially do in that scenario is you could use voice to text. Way back before voice recording note and the notes apps were like so readily available on our phones. My oldest, when he was very young, used to use a software called Dragon Dictation, and he would use his little headphones with a mic and he would dictate what he wanted to write. He wrote whole essays like this for projects, programs, and then we'd go back and we'd edit it together. You can do this now using like Google. Google has some talking apps in Google Drive. You could use this using your phone and your digital voice recorder and then having something transcribe it. There's lots of ways that you can do this on your computer now. You could also be their scribe. They could tell you and you could write it down or type it if you're a fast typist. And then come back and edit it later, edit it together later, separate that task from the initial writing. Okay, one more example. Maybe their chores are being ignored and you have figured out through that process of elimination that it's not defiance, it's the switching of tasks from what they had wanted to do to what they need to do and unclear expectations. You told them to clean their room and that's a lot. And they just don't have clear expectations of what a clean room looks like. You could create a visual checklist like I talked about doing. You could do the first step only, do one thing at a time, or you could body double. There have been times I've taken my laptop computer upstairs and I've done some writing projects that I've been working on while my kids clean because just my presence in the room helps them get things done. One of my kids in particular struggles with any kind of follow through right now, and they prefer me being around them or them being around me because if they are in their safe space in their room, they're just going to pull out a book and read. And so it helps them to have me body doubling next to them. Okay, so what actually builds motivation in our kids? Motivation grows when tasks feel doable. It grows when success feels possible, when autonomy is respected. And remember, autonomy is giving them the sense that they are their own individual person and they have some say in what's happening. And then the nervous system is regulated. It doesn't grow when pressure increases, when consequences escalate, and when shame is introduced. It's really important to remember as much as we can, especially with our neurodivergent learners and kids whom we're parenting, as well as homeschooling, that we want them to have some success every single day. We want them to achieve success. So if that means we stop an assignment before they get to the frustration threshold so we end on a high note, that's what that means. If that means we say, it's okay to be messy because this is an art class, then that's what we say. We want them to end with success so they know success is possible. They know things are doable. They know that what they're capable of is respected and that we're going to help them regulate their nervous system. And there's not going to be any shame. There's not going to be tons and tons of consequences. We're going to continue moving on slowly and surely. I want you to remember that motivation is built through success and it's not demanded before it. We can ensure that our kids continue to grow and become more and more motivated as we help them see success through their task follow through. Okay, simple 3-step reset for you. A simple 3-step reset for you. When things start to feel stuck, okay, reduce. First, reduce. Make the tasks smaller. Then support your child. Do it together, body double, stand next to them, give them a visual checklist, whatever. and then start. Start by focusing on only the beginning. That's it. So the heels are dragging, the frustration is mounting, install, implement, whatever, this 3-step reset. Stop for a second, reduce the task, reduce the project, support them through it, and then start together by focusing on only one part at a time. If your kiddo is not starting, it doesn't mean they don't care. It means that something's getting in the way. And now you have some tools to try to find it. Okay. Reduce, support, start, use that simple reset, and then remember that we want to help our kids be as successful as they can in the moment, because it's not necessarily a lack of motivation. Something is getting stuck in the way that's holding them there. And we want to help scaffold them so they can learn to overcome those things on their own as they grow and mature. And we know it's just going to take our kids a little bit longer than it does other kids, because our kids are atypical, right? They're neurodivergent. They are not neurotypical. And that means that sometimes they need a little bit more support. If you want some practical ideas for each of the different types of executive function struggles, task initiation, organizing, prioritizing and planning, follow through, all of those different things, go over to the show notes for this episode. And in the show notes themselves, there will be a link that you can click on to download. You put your email address in and it sends it right to your email address. An executive function skills cheat sheet, I guess. It's a checklist of different things that you can do to support each of those different areas of executive function. And then if you're still struggling, reach out. Okay. I have resources for you. I have support for you. There are plenty of articles and posts on the blog, on the website, all about executive dysfunction. And there are other previous podcast episodes for you too. So download that cheat sheet, that tips sheet, to help you right now, and reach out if you have any more struggles. I do offer coaching, especially in this area. And again, there's lots of free resources on the website. Inside the Learners Lab, we talk about executive function skills and their struggles all the time. It's something that comes up month after month. We do a monthly Q&A, like office hours, ask me anything session with parents. And then we also do a Q&A with an occupational therapist every month. And then we have occasional master classes throughout the year. And we do have all of the recorded master classes in there. And there are several that focus on executive function struggles. So check those out over on the show notes or in the description, wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm going to continue talking about executive function struggles, and we're going to pinpoint all the different ways that it can manifest and cause struggles in our homeschool and in our home, and how you as a parent can really support your kids over the next 4 episodes or so of the podcast. So if you don't subscribe to the podcast, make sure you do so you don't miss one of those episodes. You could also subscribe to the newsletter. If you get the download, you'll automatically be subscribed to the newsletter, but there's also a place on the sidebar of my website where you can subscribe to. The newsletter comes out regularly and gives you lots of actionable things to support your homeschool, especially when you're parenting and raising neurodivergent kids. So check that out as well. Okay, so we will be back, same time, same place next week. Thank you again to CTC Math, our sponsor for this episode. We really appreciate you. If you need a great math program, check them out at ctcmath.com. And I hope you enjoy your kiddos. Have a great week. Love on them. Support them. You've got this. You're the absolute best parent for your kid and the best teacher for them. I will talk to you soon. Have a great week. Bye for now.